Okay, so the next thing that we were going to do is hair. We do this with the brush tool. I was listening to my last video and all the slow talking and thinking too hard and shit. I was just like, oh God, what am I doing? That layer is locked. So you go up here to the brush tool. I like to set the density up high and the blend almost the same, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher, it doesn't really matter. Pick the color and then choose a highlight. And then brush along the direction of the hair. That is something that is sometimes, like when you're working with a big mass of hair like this, it's hard to tell what goes where and how. This is where you get to be creative and make that shit up. So you can turn the blending down and choose a darker color and define the hair a little more. You could also do what I should have probably done to begin with before I locked the layer, which is go through and fill in all the little spots like this. That your selection tool missed. Damn. And like before, we're not going to do the whole entire layer, but I'm going to show you how to do a few things. We'll do one side of her hair, make it look cool. And this is just 3 colors. I got black for the low layer. I guess I was using a little bit more of a brown color. I got black for the dark. Base tone, and then a highlight. That's it. Whoops. Another hazard of using the reference picture in the program. Don't do that, it's awful. Oh shit, I forgot to lock that layer again. Hazards of working with layers. Remembering your filters. Remembering to turn the filters off when you merge layers down. What else? So many things. Pains in the ass. They look so good. So then we go, pick a lighter color, and turn that blending back up again. You can hear me shifting. I'm actually moving my tablet around instead of moving the screen. You can do that over here though, on the angle. Right underneath the preview image, the angle will move it. And then you hit the little stop button and it goes back to base. Hair is one of those things that you just have to get used to doing the strokes of the brush. That is something that it comes with practice, doing these long blending strokes. And once you figure out how to do it, you start looking good. You have to be confident and you have to let your hand move quickly. Doing it slow does not look nearly as good. You can still get it done. It takes a little more work if you do it slower. Once I do my highlight, I usually go back through and clean up a little bit, make it darker in places. And you know, this is hair. It's like you can use like 5-6 different colors if you want to. You can make it dark places, and you know, just use these when you're working with straight hair. When you're working with curly hair, it's a completely different story. I might even do a tutorial for that. I don't know who the hell has curly hair to worry about, but it's completely different. So these long blending strokes really bring out the shape of the hair. And for sections like this, where one section of hair goes underneath the other, you do the top section first, and this is another good place where it would be, it's good to make sure that you have, because you're blending all of it, you want to make sure that you have an unadulterated sample of your highlight colors so that you don't lose them. And like I said, you can go up here and drop that highlight color right there. A little end palette. And as long as you save your settings, it will always be there later. So if you're the kind of person that maybe would draw Crystal Reed every day, if given the chance. So then, as you can see, this is kind of messed up right here. This doesn't quite look right, so all we have to do is take the dark color and just stroke right over the top of it and blend it in, separate those sections of hair. That's how you do hair. And you can darken that up. You can make it look as dark or as light as you want. You can also make it look shiny by putting the density high and the blend low and the dilution higher. And just doing a couple little hits like that. And then turning the density down and the blend up. Maybe not so much. Oh, go back to your base tone. Base tone. Yay. And blending those highlights in on the ends with those long blending strokes. Like so. And most of the time, hair has a highlight of a halo, so it'll go around the highest point of the head or the side that is facing your light source. This picture has a weird light source, so and I kind of chose it for that, so you can pick your own light source if you want to practice with a picture that has a more defined light source. Might be helpful. I chose this picture because it looks cool, and also because it is challenging in a couple of different ways. So this up here, this mess up here next to her hand is all sort of like flyaway hair that's at the end. What we're going to do there is lock the layer. So you go to Preserve Opacity, right up here, click it, sample one of the darker colors in the hair, and then change the color of these little flyaways up here. You can actually do this with all the hair if you want. I like colored line work. I think it looks pretty cool. Let's come down here and do it to the hair that's over her head. I have a picture of Arden that has purple hair, actually. And as you can see, when we do that to the stuff that's on her temple, it just blends right in. It just disappears. The line work. That defined it before it kind of melts into it. Oh, we're going overboard. We don't really need to do this, but we're doing it anyways. Okay. So what I do with these little flyaway type hairs, because now you don't need your line work to be closed anymore. You can pretty much do what you want with it. You can erase it or keep it or whatever. These were just ideas, basically. This is like a reminder that they existed. So either way, you gotta unlock your layer. So unclick Preserve Opacity. So what I have it on is it's on the same brush setting with the same blend setting and everything. And you just come up here. What the hell did I do? Oh. This is what happens if you erase when you haven't unclicked lock. It turns white, but it doesn't actually go away. I'm so used to having a white background, I didn't even notice that. And you do a pass with the brown, and then go a little bit darker and turn the blend down, and this is where you're kind of defining these little flyaways. You could also just cap it off in the line work layer, not have the flyaways at all. Flyaways are sort of a realistic thing. If you want it to be really realistic, that's what you gotta do. You turn down the dilution and blend all the way, and do a few passes with the darkest color, just to really define these little hairs here. And then blend the texture in to the surrounding hair, so that it doesn't look strange. And you don't have to go all the way down with this heavy texture here. just a little. This with a much smaller brush than we had before. Those long strokes look pretty cool, you can see. So that's how you do that. And also you can add little bits to the edges of her hair. Make it look more realistic and stuff if you want to. And whenever you get little marks in the hair that kind of don't go along with the rest of it, you just put the brush back on blend and go over it with a dark color again. Pull the blend up. You take the blend down, that gives you definition. Put the blend up. You can work the hair into itself. Okay, that's hair. So we did soft shading on the face. Let's do hard shading. Oh, and fix this, because it's just going to drive me nuts. Oops. So I'm going to lock the layer again, just so that I don't screw it up later. Sample a dark color from the face. So on the skin, you can also use the brush. To do a harder shading, like what would be around the hands. And we'll get our reference picture back again. So the reason why you do harder shading on the hands is because there's a lot of wrinkles. There's a lot of color variations and little tiny spots and things like that. And this isn't going to be as dark as the original picture. You can make it as dark as the original picture, but you know, for teaching purposes, we're going a little lighter so you can see all of it. Fill in all this part that's supposed to be black. And then you can see right here, along her hand, we have some definition. And it's just like the face. Just sort of scrub that in there. Put this dark color everywhere that you can see. It's very, very dark. And you move the brush in the direction of the wrinkles of the hand, because when you go through and you blend it in a little, you follow those same pathways, and that keeps the integrity of the shape of the hand and the wrinkles in the hand intact. So these wrinkles, you know, go up from the palm, and the shapes on the backs of the hands are long. The whole front of this finger is totally dark. And there's the shapes of the backs of the knuckle. And in between. So now we pull the shading, or pull the blending up, density down, and basically go back over the top of the marks that we already made in the same pattern, the same direction. I just went and broke my rule and did it sideways, and you can see that mark, how it goes sideways. You don't want to do that. So this will actually darken up some of the spaces, so don't go into your highlight spaces like I just did over here. But it does provide the gradient of her skin. So you blend that in on her hands by going in those same directions, and use the small strokes because you don't want to blend it all too much. Just like on the face, you don't want to make mud. You want to get rid of your really, really hard lines, but mud is just, looks weird. Now you can pull that blending back down, density back up. Go back and put definition in where there's like deep wrinkles. And this is what I do. I hit the blur tool again, but it's small. It's not going to be a big blur tool. Oh, highlight would be really great. So let's do that. That was that other thing that I was supposed to do. So here's the highlight on the back of her hand right here, and a little bit on the knuckles. Just a smidge. And it's just highlight. It's not, there's not a lot of, in this part there's not a lot of wrinkles, so I'm not going to worry about that. So you can blur that highlight in. Most of the highlights are going to go like that. But then the darker stuff that you want to keep defined, you blur where it's soft. But for the most part, just don't touch these little wrinkles down here. You can touch one side of them, but don't touch the other. That way you get to keep your definition. When you're working with places that have wrinkles or hard planes like the hands, you want to keep one side of that line. You might let one side of that line have integrity. Blend the other if you want to. So when I'm color correcting, I use tiny, tiny, tiny little strokes, and I just sort of cover the area that doesn't have the right color in it. It's not quite dark enough. So I picked a little bit of a darker color. I'm going through and I'm defining everything. Now this stuff I may or may not blend. Just depends on how good the lines go down. If they look good when you put them down, then you don't screw with it. Leave it. So what I'm going to do is in the middle, blend just a little, tiny, tiny bit, and then blend in all these little marks just to darken up the tone a little. It's like blending paint on a canvas. And then you can go really, really small with the blur to get these little details. Here we go. The next thing I want to show you is very, very big, soft shading, which is a lot of large portions of skin. It's done a little differently than the rest of what you've seen. So like around her neck, you can see that's very dark right there in the corner where you can see her clavicle is. And she has a smooth neck, but there's a lot of skin texture right around that area. So make sure that your layer is locked. You can sample your dark color. And hit the airbrush. And I have it set to spread noise, 100%. And density is 50%. So what you do is you shade in the direction of the contour. So we know that her neck is round. Oh, and one of the things that you can do actually, so that you don't go up into her face here, so that you can separate these two things, is you can go to the black line layer and go to the transparency strict and the select tool. Oh, make sure it's on working layer. I do this all the time, like constantly. It's completely ridiculous. So what I usually do is I go up and I hit increment a couple of times just to make sure that I cover all that area. And so now you can get right up to the edge there, and it won't go up into her face. So this is the corner right here where you can see that where that dark shadow is. And then you just go right up, kind of mark that space out. Right there. It goes down sort of like that. And the other side's about the same. Just block the whole section in. So you can see that. It goes right about there. So we'll keep it contained though. We don't need to get that deep into it. So this is a very, very dark thing. It's just like this one up here. So we'll hit a little bit of the highlight, and right here in the middle of her neck you can see that little tiny bit of highlight. And you just a dab. I mean, just barely hit it. And then, you know, you can put some up here on her chest because it's light there too. And then it's the same blur tool, but you go pretty big blur tool set all the way up. And you go ahead and really just scrub the hell out of that stuff. Blend it all together, but don't touch the really, really heavy parts yet. So this is where you want to make those big, soft sections of skin really, really well blended, so they look nice and soft. And then you go a little bit smaller and start blending in the edges. And then just barely hit that highlight, just like before. You really don't want to hit those highlights too hard, or you're just going to make it mud. And what I usually do is you look at the shape, and then you take the blur tool and you go over those shapes that are prominent. just to make sure that they're soft but still defined. So back up and look at that. I really think that that area needs a darker color, but we're trying not to go too dark with this picture, so we're just barely going to touch it with some dark. Just a little tiny bit. And barely blend that in. See how that looks. That looks about right. We're missing a little bit of dark right there, though. You can fix that by scratching it in a little. It's just barely tapping it with the airbrush. And then blending it in really well. And then you just correct the shapes. Tiny little tweaks. You're gonna change your brush a lot when you do this sort of thing, because you're just gonna do a little bit here and a little bit there until it looks perfect, or as close to perfect as you want it to be. Obviously that looks a little weird because her face isn't done, but it looks enough like her neck. There is a little bit of a highlight back here in the corner. If you look at that right there, that's pretty easily achieved. You just hit your base color, go back to your airbrush, and then put it in and just barely hit it with the highlight. So as you can see with her neck, it doesn't look exactly like in the picture. It's not perfect. It doesn't really ever need to be. That's something that you should remember when you're trying to make realistic art, is that it needs to look right. It doesn't need to look perfect. And that looks just fine like that. So the next thing that we can do is her lips. I've been waiting for this. This is going to be fun. I promise. So the first thing that we can do is just sample right off of the picture. And this layer is locked, so you don't have to worry about doing any of the selection or anything like that. You should use the airbrush. I have mine set at 75, and I'm going to use a 14, and I've sampled this color right around in here from the original picture. And this is just the same as all the rest of it. You go through and you put the color down where you see it. So there's a little bit around the edges of her lips. And the strokes go the same as what we saw on the neck. So the texture of her lips goes up and down, like so. The same goes here, and it's rounded, sort of rounded. So that's how you want to make the strokes of your brush when you're moving them. Even if you end up blending it out, it still puts things where where they're supposed to go. If you do it like that. Okay, so that's about right. That looks about right. And you sample the next lighter color. Put that down where you see that. And when you want to blend, but you're not doing the blur tool yet, you can lay down little hatch marks of the lighter color, and when you blend it in later, it will actually do the same thing as what happened on the neck. It will just darken up or lighten it up a little. So that color, right around there. And then the lightest color, you sample that. You can see how I'm marking that in. I'll zoom in on this a lot so that you can see exactly how I'm doing it. Just quick little marks in the direction of the texture of the lip. And then, because we can't sample the lightest tones, go very, very small, like maybe 6 or 7 brush size, and a really light color, and just hit right in the very middle of where those lightest highlights are. And before you blend, this would be a good time to sample your colors and put them up here. So that you can go back. You can just sample that color twice. That's great. It's okay. I'll just cover it up with a better one. There we go. That's about it. So you kind of take a look at it and see if you're missing anything. I think I am. I didn't really get that well enough. Right here. I feel like there's a little bit of highlight right there. It's kind of happy little trees, but we're doing happy little lips instead, right? I'm so clever. Now for the darkest dark. It's probably pretty close to black. But that's okay. The lip line is actually one of the darkest lines on the face. So it's the same thing. Zoom in real far so you can see. You lay down that line right along the lips where you can see it's dark. And then you see this is a guideline. That black guideline. I sketched that in there when I was doing it because the color was so harsh right there. And then a few little marks right along the edge just to blend it in. And up just a smidge. As you can see, that already looks pretty freaking cool. So what we're going to do is the blur thing, but very, very small. Because there is a lot of texture on the lips, we want to keep that texture. Just like on the hands. So this is kind of, you know, you can see the way that we do it is similar to different places, different parts. Like the neck where we contoured, and you know, the hands where we use a small blur. So it keeps the texture. So the very, very small blur tool, like I would say 5 or 6, and just barely go in the direction up and down of the texture. Until it looks good, until it looks sort of like the picture. If you over blur this, just hit Control Z and undo it and try again. Some parts of it you can make really soft, but you want to keep the texture in most of it so that they continue to look like lips. And like everything else, we're going to go over it at the end to put the detail back in after we blur the base in. And we're also going to get rid of that guideline. Okay, in the picture, this part looks very, very smooth right there in the middle. But there's a lot of texture down here. My highlight's kind of in the wrong place. Look at that, kids. Should kind of be like right here, and I put it way the hell down here. Even the best of us fail horribly sometimes. But it is a pretty good lesson, though. I mean, I've been doing this for like, God even knows how long. And you've seen the stuff that I make, and I still don't do it very right. Just like, nah, I just totally screwed that up. There we go. Undoing the screwing up. Let's try this again. Just a few marks. Not all those ones that I put in. There we go. That's better. So now you want to go a little lighter. Go to about 20% with your airbrush. And make sure that you have the right color. And mark in some texture that you are not going to blur. So you're just doing this just barely, just hitting it just to put that texture back in. If you over texturize it, you can always go back and blur it, or you can undo it, whatever. So go back with a dark color. There's some texture. This mostly just gonna get left here. I think I'll hit that with a blur a little bit. And you can repeat this process of like putting in texture and blurring it like, 25 times if you want. It's not like you can only do it twice. You run the risk of, turning it into mud, like I said before, but as long as you're careful and you use a small blur tool on small spaces, you should be fine. I just made that ugly. How did I do that? I'm satisfied with that. I like it. I think that it looks close enough. It's good. I'm happy. So now, what I'm going to do is get a very small eraser, and I'm going to erase, make sure that your line work is unlocked, and I'm going to erase these guidelines that I put in. Because we do not need them anymore. And now we are going to color our line work to match the lips so that it blends in. So this is a kind of cool thing. You come over here, you sample the color, make sure that your line work layer is locked, preserve opacity, and you take the airbrush and you knock it down to like 15. You want about 15 density. And then you just start coloring your line work. So, right about here, the line, the inside, right inside the lip starts to get lighter. So I'm going to resample the color right next to that. Very, very close to that line. And continue on and up into the corner. As you can see, that changes everything. It looks like a lip liner now instead of a big black line right around the edges of her lips. So we can do the very, very dark color for the corners of the mouth, because the corners of the mouth are very dark. That's odd. Maybe a little lighter. You can always just choose a color that looks good too. This isn't really the color that I started out with. I went a little bit darker. Do this all the way around the lips. And I would just leave this part right here where the darkest dark is black, because there's no point in making it like the nearly black shade that it is. Just leave it as black. While you're here, you can, this little line right here, all of these lines, if you want to go through and you want to color your line work, I like it. I think it looks cool. Kind of makes the line work disappear a little. Turns it into more of a contouring idea than actual line work. Let's back up and look at that. Very cool. We have lips. They are awesome.